This is another Bookpotato interview. Today I am with Glynn Holloway, the author of 1066, What Fate Imposed. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you, Tom?
Very, very good. Very good. It's been an interesting day. We've had a medieval festival in Leatherhead today. 1066, obviously it's a famous year. What's it about? Can you give us a brief description of the book and we can go into why you wrote it?
Well, it's a real Game of Thrones. Edward the Confessor, the English king, has decided he's not going to leave an heir, and that means that there aren't many obvious successors, but there are quite a few people around who are going to put a claim in, and they've got a good advance warning because Edward makes this promise never to produce an heir about 20 years before he dies, so there are eyes fixed on the English throne. People are jockeying for position in England in court, so there are family feuds, court intrigues. The Pope gets involved for various reasons. William the Conqueror decides he's got a claim, and Harold Hardrada, the Norwegian king, decides he's got a claim. And what happens is that the story follows all of the trouble bubbling up over the years until it culminates in 1066 with three battles in England, and the final one being Hastings, the one everybody
Sure,
knows.
the famous one. So it's a fiction, but it's very much following historical facts, historical places, times, battles, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I did that because what happened is my wife, Alice, bought me a book about Harold, the last Anglo-Saxon king, and it's a straightforward history book, and I read that, really enjoyed it, and I decided I'd read a lot more around the subject because it fascinated me.
Sure.
And it's a very dynamic period in English history, and it's comes up to a watershed mark where our history goes completely off a tangent, and things go in a completely different direction. So it is an important year. So I was fascinated by this, and I thought, well, somebody really ought to put a novel together based around this. And I decided it was going to be me because of my background in history. I just thought, well, I'm sure I could do it,
Sure.
and that's what I managed to do. I succeeded. So that takes us up to 1066 and the Battle of Hastings, and then there are going to be more to follow on.
That's fantastic. So this was your very first finished written book. What did you do beforehand, and how did you find writing this? Was it a natural thing for you to do this? Was it a bit of a leap of faith, hoping that it would work out?
Well, the only writing I'd done before is way back, when I was doing a history degree, doing essays. But I think it was just sheer enthusiasm that made me do it, and I felt like the cub reporter who'd got the scoop and wanted to tell everybody, the news. I was 950 years behind the deadline, but I was still wanted to get the story out. And it's just blind enthusiasm, really. And doing the research, because I was doing research while I was writing, I'd follow particular things up, and I'd make a new discovery about things, about the way weddings went, or about just little things like bathing habits, and the fact that over in the Danelaw they had saunas, 950
Oh really?
years ago.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it was quite an elaborate wedding, so everybody would the bride and groom would have their saunas to purify themselves before before they became a handfast couple, and they'd have their wrists tied together, hence tying the knot and all this. So I was reading that, and I was thinking, well, I didn't know that, so I'm trying to work out what I can put into the story and what I can't, and it just kept me going, really.
Well, I can understand your enthusiasm. As I said, you're trying to get the story out, because that's the beautiful thing about history, certainly having 1,000 years of it. There's so much that you can learn about and discover and yeah, everyone thinks, oh, well, we all know 1066, William the Conqueror, but as I said, there's things that you find that hasn't been spoken about for possibly hundreds of years. So how long did it take you to accomplish this? Because it's quite a big book. How long from concept to it being on the shelves?
From concept to it being on the shelves, about 10 years, I think.
Well, really? Okay.
But the writing and researching, because I was writing part-time a lot of the time, and the researching involved trips like family holidays to Normandy, to York, to Sussex, watching reenactments and all that kind of thing. So it took quite a while.
Yeah. I can imagine it would. The follow-up, you said there's going to be more. Has that been a quicker process?
Yes, because I'm already familiar with the territory.
Yes.
And I know how to organise a story now that I didn't before. Because that was originally 276,000 words long.
Wow.
Way too long, so what I've done is cut it down. So some of what would have been in the original tomb is in the second book and the third book as well.
Sure. And was that because you sought advice and help from other writers to do that? Was that from editors looking at it? Was it sort of a gut feeling on your part?
No, it was. I mean, I could have just kept on writing forever, I think, but the penny dropped somewhere that I could write forever, but I don't know if anybody else could read the book forever.
Sure.
So I sent it off to an editor, and he just said, "This is way too long. Taking far too long about this. You need to put it back." So I cut it right back to 200,000 words and sent it off again, and it was still too long. There were just things like repetition. I found it very hard to sort out what I'd put down on paper and what was in my head.
Yeah.
And it just got blurred to the point as well where some things I'd put down twice because I knew it was in the book, couldn't quite remember where. Or perhaps sometimes I thought something wasn't in the book, it was. And I put it down again. So I needed a fresh pair of eyes.
Yes,
so
of course.
my advice to anybody who's writing a book is give it to somebody else to read, and ideally an editor, because they'll look at it with a dispassionate eye.
Yes.
And that's what you need.
Sure, of course. Yeah, they're distant from it. It's not their creation, therefore they can be a bit more brutal. That seems to come up quite often, actually, when speaking to authors recently about the importance of editors, and I've heard about or occasionally met particularly independent authors who don't want an editor to get hold of their book because they feel that maybe they will steal the essence of the story, or they would want them to change it too much. But you think it's the opposite. It makes it better by doing that, not weaker.
You can tell the same story, but what they'll do is recommend that you could just change a couple of paragraphs, but it leaves the end of the paragraph with the reader wanting to know more.
Yeah.
It just naturally leads them on into the next chapter, and that feeling of, I don't want to put this book down just yet. I'll just read another chapter.
Sure.
An editor can help you.
Yeah. Well,
like spice it up, basically.
Yeah.
It's still the same story.
Yeah. I mean, you begin some really good reviews on Goodreads and the other website that we won't mention their name. And you've been in a shop today talking to people, signing some copies. Again, anyone who's listening right now and thinking, oh, that's interesting, how would you sum it up? I think the Game of Thrones has been used a bit today for an example. How would you describe generally the feel of the story and who this is for?
It's for anyone who likes history, and it's for anybody who likes a story. Actually, I was talking with someone earlier today and saying, you know, if you think history is just about dates, it's not. It's about people. Anything that's happened is history, and it's about people, because people and their nature doesn't necessarily change. They're always heroes, always villains, always the altruistic, always the self-centered, and it's the way they all work together and interact with each other that produces a story. And what you've got there is a, you know, some extreme versions of that.
Of course. What do you like about selling books, your own book, and what don't you like about the book industry, how things are done today? Any frustrations you have?
I like what I like doing is meeting the public, especially people who know a little bit about the era or know a bit about history in general and quite enthusiastic, and you can have a chat with them. It's absolute. What I most like is getting feedback. Probably because I'm just really vain. But when people come up and say, "Oh, you know, I've started reading your book. I've read a few chapters, really enjoyed it. You know, said a lot of very favourable things." That's great. So that's the bit that I enjoy, other than the, you know, the actual writing. What I find most frustrating is just trying to get it out there, and raise the profile and get people's attention. I find that really difficult. If I can stand in front of somebody with copies of the book and talk to them about it, I usually sell a copy. But you know, they a week or two or more can go by on Amazon, and you know, nothing sells. And it's very difficult as well, especially if you're an indie writer, to get your book into a bookshop and on the shelves. That's nigh on impossible.
And
so we're all very grateful to people like you for giving us the opportunity.
No, thank you. I can't remember what the number is, but it's some ridiculous number, something over 100,000 English print books are published every week, let alone every month. So there's a lot of books out there, and you've got to stand out from all the others, you know. So it's massively competitive, and it's very, very difficult. So if you are in a position where your book is selling not just to your friends and neighbours and family members, then I think you're doing something well. But yeah, it's very, very difficult, and probably the irony is perhaps that with social media it's even more difficult, because everyone's using social media, and a lot of those people are trying to sell you something, maybe their book. So it doesn't necessarily make it easier, it makes it harder. Embarking on your journey, as I said, it's taken you about 10 years to get this to where it is now, and has been for a while now. If there's one thing that you could have done differently from the starting point, what do you think that would have been?
That would have come out as 3 separate books.
Right, okay.
And I would have done more character development. That's what I would have done, looking back at it now. And I had those comments from some fellow writers who reviewed it, and they've enjoyed the book, but they said, you do know that you could have got 3 books out of this. And I've thought about it since, because I didn't believe them at the time, but I did think about it a lot afterwards, and thought, yeah, I could have had 3 separate books, and I would have been able to, just to get a bit more detail in, because that covers 21 years, so you're kind of skating over the surface in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, I do go into people's heads and you know, follow their thoughts around, so the characters, the central characters, are fairly well developed, but with a book of 3, you know, it gives you far more opportunity to develop them. And so that's what I would have done.
Sure. And in the meantime, over those 3 books, you're building up a fan base, and people are starting to look forward to your next book. And so that's probably a wise decision. I think a lot of people. I do know another author, an independent author, who's done a similar sort of thing, but he regretted the second book, because the feedback he's got is, oh, it's not telling me enough, and you know, I want more, and the third one's not ready yet. So yeah, you've got to stick to the course.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. Either way, you're going to upset someone. But yeah, I think that's probably good advice. Any other sort of ideas or advice you could have for someone who's perhaps watching this, who wants to write something but hasn't? They've got an idea, but
yeah, I'd just say just start writing and keep at it, and don't expect to have a beautiful piece of literary prose first time off. I don't think anybody's ever started typing or writing and just written the perfect novel right off. Maybe I don't know. F. Scott Fitzgerald did. I don't know. I certainly didn't. And you have to be prepared to go through the book. I mean, I've gone through that. I don't know how many times, 25, 30 times, working on it and polishing it and improving it to the point that it's at now. But I think some people, because I've spoken to one or two people at various events, and it's very much as though they say, I've written something, but it's rubbish. Well, it might not be, the idea might not be expressed terribly well, but the germ's there, and what you can do is kind of nurture that, and something will develop from it.
yeah,
You know, and just go with that, but don't expect it to be, you know, beautiful the first time round.
that's very interesting actually, and I think I like the way you just put that. Don't expect it to be beautiful the first time around, because you wouldn't necessarily expect a painter who's doing an oil painting to knock a portrait out in oil or something within an hour. You know?
And it's the same with music. I mean, you wouldn't expect a musician to go up to a piano. Oh, I know. I'll just write, you know, a concerto or something.
Yeah, I'll record this album in an afternoon on a Sunday or whatever. It takes time, and maybe, unless you're going through that process, maybe the average, whatever the average means, reader doesn't understand that. Perhaps they just think that everything they read in the book is just coming off the fingers of the writer, and I can never reach that level. But maybe it's because they say you've been polishing it for 10 years or so. So I think that's very good advice actually. I think that's probably very true. So when do you think your new book, and is it a continuation of this?
The new book,
story?
In the Shadows of Castles, the manuscript's going off to an editor in the middle of October, so I'm hoping it should be ready to go to the printers in about February, March, so early next year.
And similar themes, it's a continuation.
It follows on
from
the Battle of Hastings up until the harrying of the North. So
if people wanted to contact you, who are interested in either buying a copy or just finding out more about what you do and your new book, is there a website or social media that people can get in contact with?
They can reach me on www.gkholloway.co.uk, and that'll take you to my website. And I'm also on Facebook as well.
Sure. I'm sure people can find you from your website, and I'll put the links on the video.
Great.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.